Hey everyone, you are here at Litvak Leadership Live, and I am here with my new friend who really operates in an interesting niche or niche, depending upon the way you prefer to say the word. Let me introduce you to Mike Lightner with Dare to Dream Leadership Development. Yes, I was reading it because I wanted to make sure I got it right. So, Mike, welcome to Litvak Leadership Live.
It's awesome to be here. I look forward to having a conversation with you on one of my favorite subjects, which is leadership.
Yeah. So, to tell everyone a little bit about your background, I love talking to people who were in the military. So, first of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Everyone in the military that I have met just seems to be so driven. And then the question is, once they get out of the military, what are they driven to? So tell everyone a little bit about your background before we jump into it.
Yeah, so as you said, I was 30 years in the Air Force. I retired out of the Pentagon, where I was the career field manager. So I managed about 5,200 people and about $8 billion worth of stuff. Somewhere along in my career, I discovered this thing called leadership development. And it happened at a pivotal point where really, if I didn't change who I was and I didn't change the direction I was going, then there was going to be another change, and they were going to change me. Basically, they were going to fire me and bring somebody else in. So I got on this leadership growth and discovery kind of journey. And what I realized throughout my career was that there were a lot of other people out there like me, people that were showing up for work every day, working as hard as they possibly could, not knowing that they were doing the wrong thing and going in the wrong direction. And so I decided that when I retired, that's what I wanted to go do. That's where I didn't want to leave the Air Force. I wanted to go do something else that was going to help grow and develop other people that were like me, people that just needed some help and didn't know they needed it.
And so it seems to me that anyone who doesn't realize that they need help in developing themselves, becoming a leader, just must be really new at what they're doing. And I say that as that was me for years, thinking I got this figured out. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yes and no. So
Okay.
the first thing we have to understand is that choice is a function of awareness, right? We can't make the choices we don't know exist. So as we're building our career, initially our energy, our drive to do, be, and have more gets us those initial promotions, right? Like we get promoted because of our potential and the things that we're doing. So people see that energy, they see that drive, and they promote us. But at some point, we hit this lid where we're doing everything we've been doing in the past, but it's not getting us any further, right? Like we've maxed out our ability to lead. And because of that, we just keep hitting this wall, hitting this wall, hitting this wall. And that's where I was at in my career. I was doing everything I had been doing in the past. I'd gotten promoted really, really fast. I'd outpaced most of my peers. I just was stuck. I couldn't get any further. I was in this rut. And I don't know, it's been said, a rut is nothing more than a grave with both ends knocked out, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So it was once I started learning the tools of leadership, I realized how stuck I actually was and didn't even know it. And what I could say is, if you're a leader and you're in a position where you're leading other people, but you feel frustrated, you feel like there's more for you, or you feel like your team's just not getting the results that they could, then you're probably at that point as well. You're probably stuck and you just need that little bit of help to move you out of that hole.
And that little bit of help for people that are passionate is what you do as a career now.
Yeah, absolutely. But with one caveat, right? I like to work with leaders that want to grow and develop other leaders. And you might say, well, what does that mean exactly? Or why is that important? And there are people out there that that want to grow and develop as leaders, but they're self-interested, right? They're worried about their own career. They're worried about moving themselves forward. And I've worked for some of those folks, and some are okay folks, and others are not nice people, right?
Yeah.
But every time I work with someone that is interested in helping to take what they're learning and giving it to somebody else, every time I work with somebody that wants to help grow and develop the people around them, I realize that they are selfless people. In other words, they think of themselves less. They don't think less of themselves,
Right.
but they think selflessly. They want to take what they're learning, share it with others, and everybody grows up the ladder at the same pace, right? They're just nicer people, I guess, for lack of better terms. And this is a genuine but yet strategic thought, in that not only are they going to be nicer for me to work with, but they're also probably more likely to take my body of work and pass it on to another generation, right? So it's genuine in that I want to help people that are going to help people, but at the same time, I also want to grow my business, and I can do that through people that are going to be willing to take my message and pass it on to those they're working with.
So one thing you just said intrigues me, that you want to work with people who want to, develop other leaders, and then they move on at the same pace. So are you saying that one's team should grow at the same pace, all of them, or did I misunderstand you?
No, absolutely. I affirmatively believe that you are either going to grow up or you're going to grow out. So in other words, when it comes to leadership, you set the example. You're setting the pace.
Sure.
And the people that can keep up with that pace, they're gonna keep up with that pace. And the ones that don't, they're gonna fall off. They're gonna find somewhere easier to work, and they're gonna self-eliminate. And by doing that, by moving those top 80 percenters up and allowing those lower 20 percenters to move themselves out, you just clear room for more potential to come in to whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah, you're going to make those people that don't want to live up to your example uncomfortable enough where they're going to go find somewhere easier to work.
Interesting. So what about when your leadership within the organization you're in as a leader doesn't necessarily buy into the way you're leading the team with the 80-20 rule, that, that, I don't know, people have been told you're being too hard on so-and-so. You can't expect them to have the same expectations as you because you're their immediate superior. If they had the same expectations on themselves that you have on yourself, you'd be reporting to them. I'm sure you've heard people talk about that before.
Not only have I heard people talk about it, I've experienced it myself.
Okay.
I worked for a boss that was that way. He tended to pander to the lower 20%, ones that I wasn't necessarily all that concerned about. And here's what's great about people with high potential is they know they will always have a job, right? I knew I was good at what I did, and I knew no matter where I worked, I was going to be successful. I can't say he could say the same. So when push came to shove, it really became our boss's boss. It really became his decision, because we weren't living in a healthy environment. There was a rub there. Everybody could feel the tension between us. So literally it came down to me walking into my boss's office and say, listen, this isn't healthy, right? Either I'm going to go or he's going to go, and you get to choose, right? This is your choice.
Who do you?
Yeah, you're right. Like, this is because I know I'm going to be successful. I don't care where I'm at. Right. I know I have the tools at this point to do what I have to do. You pick. And, ultimately he made the decision to let the other gentleman go, and I stayed, and we took what was a failed program and turned it around in a year and won a major command level award. So obviously he chose wisely.
So one thing that I've experienced in my career is that, I have very high expectations for myself. And I've been told, and I've come to realize that the expectations that I have for myself and the pressure that I put myself under is not necessarily for everyone. And I can't necessarily have that same expectation on my team. Do you agree or disagree with that? And how do you work through that?
I hate binary answers, right? Either agree or disagree, yes or no, because we live in this world that's
Give
really
me a third option.
right? Yeah, I'm always searching for that third option. So the answer to your question is yes and no, in that if a person is willing to grow beyond where they're currently at and move, and even if it's just 1% each day towards the goal that you've put forward for them, then as far as I'm concerned, they're on board, they're on track, and they're doing the right thing. But if you're pouring your heart out as a leader and you're putting everything in and they're not willing to at least give you that 1%, then they're probably not the person you want or need on your team. I made the second half of my career was going around taking failed organizations within the Air Force and turning them around. And all I ever asked from day one is just give me 1% better. I don't care what you're doing. Just do it 1% better today than you did it yesterday, and we will be good. And everybody that did that was hugely successful. And everybody that didn't, we let go. We moved on.
And that 1% that you expected of them, did you tell them how to do it? Or was it up to them to find out how it worked for them?
No, that's on them. Now, if they came to me and they asked, I would certainly give them suggestions. But what I've found is that people that come up with their own solutions, their own ideas, tend to actually follow through with those solutions and ideas rather than ones that are imposed on them.
So Brian Weevil has a question here. Who is your influence?
I think having a single influence in your life is a mistake. Okay. It's good to have a mentor, but it's better to have multiple mentors. So when I look at leadership development, for example, John Maxwell has had a huge influence in my life. That's why I'm a member of his team. I'm a speaker, trainer, coach with the John Maxwell Company and an executive director with them, as well as another gentleman named Paul Martinelli with Empowered Living. I'm an ambassador for the Empowered Living community, and he helps me with my mindset, right? Because believe it or not, we all have this negative voice in our head. I call mine Norm, right? He's that negative voice that wants me to stay normal, to stay in my little box. And every day I need some help to try to push the boundaries of that box. What can I do to kind of break out of what I'm doing every day to do something new, different, to learn, to be and have more? And he helps me with that. So those are just two examples. But yeah, you have really 5 main areas of your life. You've got your career, you've got your personal life, your family life, you've got your physical, you've got your spiritual, for those that are spiritual folks, and then I'm drawing a blank on the 5th one. But anyways, if you're not looking to grow in all 5 areas of your life, then you're probably not in harmony with yourself, which is going to cause some friction in your life.
Would the 5th one be intellectual or emotional intelligence, or?
It'll come to me as soon as we're done with the interview, I'm sure.
When we're done with the interview, don't click off. You can tell me backstage. So you just brought up the spiritual. How does your faith affect your leadership?
Yeah, faith for me is a broader term than just spiritual. Like we all have faith, whether we want to admit it or not. We have faith in the fact every day when we get up that gravity is going to work, right? Like we're going to get out of bed, jump out of bed, and gravity is going to be there, and it's going to happen. So to me, faith is nothing more than a belief in things that we can't necessarily see or explain. Okay. So I have faith in my ability to grow my business. Otherwise, I wouldn't be spending time and money and effort in growing my business. If there wasn't that seedling of faith there to keep me moving, then it just wouldn't happen. So to me, faith is just that underlining belief that drives us, whether it be spiritually, whether it be financially, whether it be at work, with our family, whatever. If you don't have the faith that what you're doing is successful or will be successful, then chances are you're not going to have the passion and the drive to follow through with it.
There is a scripture for that. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I mean, as you were describing it, I was like, well, yeah, he's speaking scripture and sounds like doesn't even realize it. So it's absolutely there. So how do you specifically define leadership? You've told us all about leadership, but if you needed to put it in a succinct sentence or two, what would it be?
Yeah, my favorite definition of leadership comes from John Maxwell, and it's from his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. He says that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And I love that definition because if you think about what influence is, right? Influence is the ability to have an effect on the character, the development, or behavior of someone else or something else. And that's really what we're talking about. We're really talking about having an effect on someone else's life or an impact in someone else's life. And in my case, I prefer to think of it in light of positive terms, although there are negative influences out there as well. But as a leader that wants to grow and develop people, I think with that selfless service mindset, you can't help but have an influence in other people's lives. And in that case, you couldn't help but lead them.
So tell us about your books. When we and I thought I hit the right button, but I didn't. So let's try this one now. There we go. Okay, so which book was first?
The first book was Lead Bold, Lead Strong, Lead Well. It's the 9 proven leadership secrets anyone can learn and apply. Interesting story. That book was not intended for public consumption. Okay. At the time that I wrote it, I was working in the Pentagon, and I knew my son wanted to go into the military. My son was still in high school at that point, and I knew he wanted to be an officer. Right. Well, one day I got up early like I normally did. I went and worked out, and I had some chest pains while I was working out. And I really didn't think much of it because it had happened before and it really wasn't that big of a deal. But then on this particular day, when I got to the office, I could still feel that tightness in my chest, right? And I went down to the clinic and they EKG'd me and they did all of this stuff and they couldn't find anything wrong. And so when I got home that night, I did some thinking, and I'm like, okay, Lord, if this is my early warning message, what is it that you are trying to get me to do before you call me home, right? Like, what's that one thing that I'm supposed to do? And the idea of writing down the things that I've learned in the military so that my son could grow up and have an advantage going in the military that I didn't have, right? I had to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. And how could I make his path in that career easier? So I had a program called Dragon. You basically talk to your computer and it types for you.
Sure.
And I literally sat down for 5 full days, and I just talked to my computer about what turned out to be these 9 things that really made my career a success. And I when I was all done, I kind of packaged it up. I got it ready for him. And then, and I thought about it. I'm like, if this is good enough for him, it's probably good enough to help somebody else too.
Yeah.
And so then I went through the whole self-publishing thing and decided to just put it out there for the world. So really, when people read that book, what they're really reading are the private thoughts of a top of their career father, leaving notes for their just entering their career son.
Interesting. Interesting. And you chose the self-publishing route.
I did, yeah. Yep. Amazon self-publishing is hugely easy to use. Barnes and Noble self-publishing is usually easy to use as well.
Interesting. Interesting. So what did your son think of it?
To be, my son has had a career change. He went through his first year of college, was in the academy, and decided, yeah, the military is not for him and piloting is not for him. So he dropped out of that and ended up getting a minimum wage job for a while, decided, yeah, that sucked too. And then now he's going back to school to become a network administrator, but the military is totally off his radar. So
Okay.
I don't think he's even read it.
But I think the lessons are not military specific, are they?
No, they are certainly not. No, a lot of my examples come from actually, almost all of the examples come from my military career, but they are examples that can be applied out in just about any industry in the world.
So, of your 5 books here, if someone says, okay, I need to start with one of them to get to know this guy, which book would you recommend?
Yeah, that would be the book. If it's going to be It's Up to Me, Volume 1. That one is really about learning about yourself. Really, it's learning about those things in your head that could be sabotaging your life or your career without even you knowing it. People look at my career and they always judge it by the end of it, right? I was a chief master sergeant, top 1% of the Air Force, career field manager, leading 5,200 people, blah, 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 right? And it's pretty impressive. Right. But if you looked at the first 3 or 5 or even 12 years, you wouldn't see that. You'd see a guy that for the first 3 years got in all kinds of trouble, riding my motorcycle through the dorms, getting in all kinds of trouble for underage drinking, you name it, I probably did it, right? I was in the military, but I wasn't in the military. I was there, but I wasn't committed. So there were some limiting self-beliefs that were planted in my head in elementary school that helped create a lot of those problems that I was having. And it wasn't until years later that I figured out what those were, and then was able to put strategies in place to help keep Norm in his box and me outside of the box.
So talk about Norm or any other self-talk that you have going on. I am a huge proponent of that we need to get a handle on our own self-talk, because we're always talking to ourselves. And if people say, no, I don't talk to myself, my response to them is, yes, you do. You're just not listening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The 2 most powerful words in the Bible are I am.
Yeah.
Right. Because that is where God gave us the ability to define who we are. Right. And in that moment, we determine our own future. Right. The way we define ourselves is so much more important than the way that the world defines us. So I'll share with you a little bit of the story that comes out of that book. And basically, when I was in 6th grade, my guidance counselor teacher called my dad in for a conference, and I was excited. My dad was in school, and so I go in this room with this guidance counselor and teacher, and they're having a talk, and this young lady, I'm sure she believed she was doing the right thing. She looked at my dad with me in the room and told him, Mr. Lightner, you shouldn't expect much out of Mike when it comes to reading, because Mike's not very good at reading. So any classes that require a lot of reading, he's probably not going to do very good. Well, that one instance set the tone for the rest of my academic career up through high school. I got straight D's in English, government, anything that required a lot of reading, straight D's. I was a straight D student. I got just good enough grades to pass, but not good enough grades for anything else. In fact, I'm convinced to this day that some of my teachers passed me just so I wouldn't be back in their classroom, right?
Yeah.
And but I didn't know. I was unconscious of what was going on there, right? Like I was giving them exactly what they expected. They set
Right.
the expectation and I was delivering. And then obviously years later, I figured this out and I went back to school and I graduated in the top 1% of my class. I mean, it was just me figuring out what was holding me back and deciding that person's views were not going to define me moving forward, that I had the power to overcome her words. And yeah, that's part of why I write books too, is because she told me I couldn't, right?
Uh, I had a very similar experience, and now people come to me and ask me to proofread for them. So, and every time someone does, I chuckle inside, remembering what I'd been told by multiple teachers back in high school. So tell us about your coaching and your masterminding.
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks that don't know what a mastermind group is basically a group of people who have a similar interest but think differently about them. So for example, if we do a mastermind group, we're generally going to do it around a book. I think the concepts in books are hugely important to learning. Not because we're going to read a book and do what it says, but because when we read a book, we can think about our own thoughts about what the author's saying. In
All
fact,
right.
the last book I just published is called Thoughts I Think, right? It's all quotes from great leaders in history and some of my own, and then my thoughts on that quote. And the whole premise of that book is read a quote, read my thoughts, and then develop your own thoughts. And you can either agree with me or disagree with me. That point's irrelevant, but think, right? Have your own thoughts, come up with your own thoughts. And with a mastermind group, it applies this concept of where you have one thought and another person has one thought. When we blend those two thoughts together, there's an infinite mind. There's this third thought that's created that's so much better than the two original thoughts, right? And that's kind of what the mastermind group is designed to inspire. It's designed to inspire that next level thinking, to take people's thoughts, blend them together, and come up with these infinite options.
Yes. And now, do you do this as a one-day workshop, a multiple-day workshop, or is this something where it begins like that and then continues on in some kind of online fashion? How exactly does it work for you all?
Yeah, it's usually a 6-week process. Usually it might be 7 weeks depending on the number of chapters in a particular book or in a particular subject that we're studying. And then right now, I used to do mastermind groups with individual clients. In other words, I would go out and surf for individual clients and bring them in. But due to my calendar being full, I've now just do mastermind groups with companies at this point. So if, for example, I'm working with a financial institution, they have 14 employees, and I'm leading them through a mastermind group on a particular book, but they want it as seen through a lens of DISC personalities, for example. So we're looking at the book, but we're looking at it a very specific way. In other words, how do we interpret this book based on what we've learned in the DISC personality assessment model? And it's fascinating when you before you open a book, if you think about how you're going to look at the book, if you put the glasses on for the lenses that you want to evaluate that book, you can get a totally different meaning out of it than you got when you read it before.
That is profound. I have never heard anyone say that before, and quite frankly, that makes so much sense. How did you come to understand that?
It's actually a process I learned from my mentor, Mr. Paul Martinelli. I've been studying the book Think and Grow Rich now for about 4 years. And each year he has us go through the book using a different lens. So the first time we went through it, we looked at it through the lens of persistence, right? How does persistence help you drive these concepts home? The next time we looked at it through a different lens. I don't remember that was, but what I found is that there's this part of our brain called the reticular activating system, and what that does is it helps us to focus on the things that we think we need to focus on. So if you think red, and you look around the room, chances are all of the red things are going to pop out to you.
Yeah.
But if you think red, and then look around the room at all the blue things, you're probably not even going to have noticed them, right? Have you ever seen that video where they're passing the basketball and then the ape walks? Yeah, it's the same concept. So when we're reading a book, our reticular activating system is looking for the things it thinks we want to see. And it's going to pull those things out and categorize them and make them pop for us. But it's passing up all of those things that it doesn't think we're interested in. So by framing our view or framing the way we want to look at it, we're basically telling our subconscious mind, find these things for me and put them front and center.
I'm not even sure what to say because frankly, you have such insight. It is tremendous. We've gone 32 minutes already, almost, in our 30-minute show. So this is the part of the show where I turn it over to you for the next couple minutes, and I'd like you to encourage the audience on how to move ahead in their visions and dreams that they have for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reality is that you have to understand that you are a uniquely built and designed individual. Do not allow other people to define your future. That is only something that you yourself can do. If you're interested in learning more, I do highly recommend that you start with my book. If it's going to be, it's up to me. You can do that by just going to starthere.cc. One word, starthere.cc. And that will take you to Amazon where you can get my book there. It's just a really good foundation for starting from, because until you understand who you are as a person, until you understand why you're where you're at, it's really, really difficult to move forward. And if you think about how the GPS in your car works, for example, it has to know 2 points. It has to know, first of all, where it's starting from, and it has to know where you want to go. And our brains function kind of the same way. It has to know where you're at, and it has to know where you want to go. And then it can start creating those paths for how to navigate around all the obstacles to get you to that intended direction or that intended location.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been an insightful conversation. I know that you have encouraged me. I've learned a ton. I've taken notes beyond notes here. And I definitely will want to have you on in the future if you are willing. I'm going to be a panel conversation at some point down the road, and I'd certainly like to have you be part of that panel.
That'd be awesome.
Fantastic. And for everyone else, well, that is today's Litvak Leadership Live. We will be back tomorrow at our regular time of 3 p.m. Oh, wait, we have one more comments. Let's see. All right, Jody, amen. Thank you for sharing your insight, Mike. We will be back tomorrow at our regular time at 3 p.m. So join us then, where we'll have another guest to tell us about their insights. That's it. Be blessed.